I'm Rebecca Beasley. I'm Professor of Modernist Studies at Queen's and in the Faculty of English. When I began working on this book, I think that the discipline of Modernist Studies was changing quite rapidly, probably in two major ways. One was there was a big expansion of the canon, so thinking about what modernism was doing globally, not just in Britain and in America. And the other thing that was happening was a kind of elaboration of historical contexts, more detail about how this modernist movement in Britain happening at the early 20th century came about. And my first book was about visual culture in relation to modernism. And during the course of thinking about that book, I became very interested in the way that writers were debating different kinds of models for what modernism might look like. And I became increasingly interested in the way that different national models were used. So this book was really founded on the idea that British writers were looking to either Russian literature or to French literature as a model to kind of renovate what they were doing. And this is especially true of British novelists. So my aim was to give a new account of modernism's emergence in Britain. And I wanted to provide an account of the way that writers and translators and publishers and critics were creating the kind of literary values that we still deal with today. But I also hope that I make a bit of a contribution in a more documentary way, because I was particularly interested to try and recover information about the translators and publishers of the period. So I did a lot of research into the people who were making Russian literature available in the late 19th and early 20th century, because it all becomes available in a very, very short amount of time. Really, the whole canon of Russian literature, or at least a large part of what we think of as the canon of Russian literature, becomes available between about 1880 and 1940. It's a very, very kind of intense experience. I just think that modernism is the best period of literature. It's wonderful to see writers rethinking what they want to do with writing in the broadest sense and with culture. I mean, I've always been very, very interested in the influence of visual culture on modernism and theatre and dance. So modernism is a very kind of holistic movement, and it makes it absolutely fascinating to study. So I think what most excites me about the future is simply seeing the directions that emerging scholars and students take the discipline in. But of course, that means that we need to keep hold on the value of the humanities. And over the last few years, seeing the decline in support, governmental support and funding for research students has really made a big impact, and it risks very substantially narrowing the kind of diversity and quality of voices that we're getting coming into the discipline. If I may, I'd like to mention two things that I enjoy about being at Queen's, and they may be the same things that everybody else has said. But the first one is that I really enjoy being in a community where I trust the values of my colleagues. And so what I'm thinking about here is that, although the governing body of Queen's can seem a bit distant to students sometimes, I think it is a body that's making really good progressive decisions and moving in really interesting directions. And it's just fantastic to be part of a group where you trust the people who are running things and feel that you share their values. So that's the first thing. The other thing is perhaps the most predictable thing to say, and that is just simply teaching Queen's students. I mean, this year has been really difficult for all kinds of reasons, but it is absolutely the case that teaching Queen's students, talking to them about their reading and their writing and their research, and I'm thinking here of undergraduate and graduate students, that's the thing that has really kept me going.